Hello, and welcome to the second of three launch webinars of the report Breaking the Plastic Wave, a comprehensive assessment of pathways towards stopping ocean plastic pollution. On behalf of our partner, SYSTEMIQ, and the Pew Charitable Trusts, I'd like to thank all of you for joining our webinar today. My name is Winnie Lau. I am the Senior Manager for the Preventing Ocean Plastics Project at the Pew Charitable Trust. For those of you who are not familiar with Pew is a nonprofit organization with a 70-year history that uses evidence-based, nonpartisan analysis to solve some of today's most pressing challenges. We have approximately 20 projects focused on the environment and a long history of ocean conservation work that aims to deliver public policy change and other tangible results. We are launching Breaking the Plastic Wave with the support of 4 thought partners: the University of Oxford, the University of Leeds, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and Common Seas. We hope that the report and the webinar today will be informative and instructive, as well as a catalyst for change. For our lineup today, I will begin by introducing you to Breaking the Plastic Wave and the reason it's come into being. Next, we'll hear from Martin Stuchtai, founder and partner of SYSTEMIQ and professor for resource strategy and management at the University of Innsbruck. Martin will be taking us through the report. I will then offer a few reflections after Martin's presentation, and then we will open it up and have some time for questions from the audience for myself and Martin. We would love to hear from you. For you to ask questions is a key part of what we want to do today. You can pose your questions by writing them in the chat box at the side of your screens. Alternatively, you can tweet your questions using the hashtag Breaking the Plastic Wave. So let me begin by sharing how this work came into being. In 2017, we started looking at how Pew might help solve the ocean plastic pollution problem. We recognized that there was some amazing work being done by many organizations globally. At the same time, we also identified a gap. There was a need for a solution and data-driven analysis of the potential impact of different solutions to better inform policymakers and businesses. Drawing upon Pew's strength in evidence-based analysis, we set out on a multi-year project to provide this vital information. We partnered with SYSTEMIQ and Martin, and together we charted the 2-year journey, culminating in the just-released report, Breaking the Plastic Wave, and a complementary scientific article in the renowned journal Science, which reinforces the scientific rigor of the methodology behind the report. Both of these publications were released last Thursday. The research was funded independently by Pew, included 17 experts from across the plastic value chain with broad geographic experience, and, as I mentioned earlier, conducted in close collaboration with our 4 knowledgeable thought partners, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the University of Oxford, and the University of Leeds and Common Seas. In addition, the project team consulted over 80 experts from around the globe and drew upon a wide range of existing analyses, reports, and publications to develop the model and analyses. It is also important to acknowledge that Breaking the Plastic Wave follows in the footsteps of 2 seminal reports from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which established the vision of circularity for the global plastics industry, highlighted the need for reuse, redesign, and recycling, and garnered unprecedented support across the global plastics value chain. Building on the important work by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and many others, SYSTEMIQ and Pew offer a global analysis that evaluates different strategies to reduce plastic pollution going into the ocean and quantifies the associated economic, environmental, and social implications of each pathway. The ultimate aim of our work is to help guide policymakers, industry executives, investors, and civil society leaders through a complex and often data-poor landscape of potential solutions. Our analysis points to areas where changes are needed to the global system in order to stop plastic pollution from getting into the ocean. Now I'll turn it over to Martin, who will share our key findings. Martin, over to you.
Thank you, Winnie. Can you hear me? So, thanks a lot for this introduction, Winnie. And welcome and good afternoon, Asia. Asia is, I think that's fair to say, the place where a lot of the plastic wave is breaking. Asia is also the place where many of the solutions that we so urgently need are currently under development. So thank you for joining and thanks for your interest. Have you ever asked yourself why some things draw our attentions whilst others don't? Sometimes I guess it's just experience, very personal experience, a sensation, a sight, an odor even. Here's mine. This is Munca, East Java in Indonesia. And sometimes I think it's a realization. Plastic offers us the deeper realization how far we have departed from the very design principles of nature. That's what draws our interest. And then there is a third reason why plastic draws my interest, which I'll get to in a moment. So if plastic waste draws our interest and attention, I think there's an opportunity to turn this attention into a story of how we have collectively been able to resolve a crisis on time, this time round. And that's exactly the story of the next 15 minutes that I would like to take you through. As Winnie said, it all started in 2017 with a bit of a mix between curiosity, I guess, and frustration. All of you who work on ocean plastic can share that frustration. All the conferences, the boardroom discussions, the panels, and how often all those different statements, those different propositions that are often offered are either purely substantiated, often they go uncontested, and they are typically unreconciled. There's one proposition that we can turn away from plastic altogether. There's just no place for it. There is a proposition that in the greater scheme of things, it's okay to deposit it and to incinerate it. There's a proposition that plastic is this one material where we can create a bit of an ecological overshoot and clean up post factum. There's a proposition that we can recycle ourselves out of it if we just build a recycling industry the same size of the plastic industry. There is a proposition that we just have to move to a new generation of materials that actually disintegrates and biodegrades in front of our eyes. And we don't have a reference point, we don't have a fact base to answer even some of the most fundamental questions associated with those unreconciled propositions. What are their environmental, economic, or social performance really? How do they apply to certain geographies or materials over others? How do these strategies really interact? What do they cost to bring them to life? And how much time do we need to bring them to life? Because time matters. Because whilst we are debating and whilst we are stating, the tide is rising on plastic. And here we are back in Munca, East Java. That's the reason why we took up this work. It tried to build on all the foundational work of so many, Jenna Jambek, Le Breton, the UN, the World Bank, of course, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. But it tries to be relevant in 4 additional ways. It really tries to focus on solution. It's a system-wide stochastic model that covers the entire value chain that we have developed together with Professor Richard Bailey from the Oxford University. It is data-driven and it tries to be scientifically rigorous. That's why we sought to publish it in the Science Journal, which we did last week. And that's why it underwent blind peer review. It rests very much on the support and the insights of an exceptional group of human beings and an exceptional group of scientists and experts across all geographies, many disciplines, and of all age and gender. We owe a lot to them. It was a very intense joint journey. Let me summarize our findings along 5 very a lot of it starts to interact with the environment. Out of the total plastic production in 2017 of about 350 million tons, 215 million tons actually end per year. And that's the amount that will make the stock that actually sits in the ocean quadruple by 2040. 2x, 3x, 4x. That is a future that no one can want. So what's the way out? Some of you may ask, how isn't that too pessimistic, really? There's a lot of things happening in the plastic industry. The whole industry got in motion. That's right. There are many industry level commitments for recyclability and recycled content. And we see government action. The European Plastic Strategy are 90 countries that brought regulations such as plastic bag bans. So we try to provide a quantitative perspective, and we try to estimate the effect that this will have on the business as usual. Overall, it will bring volumes down by 7% only. It's not going to bend the curve. And this is bringing coastal communities and the ocean environment into risk, but also it creates exposure for a whole global industry. Until 2040, the business as usual volumes of plastic are going to be associated with cleanup costs, with waste management costs of $100 billion. That's about 3 times the profit pool of the entire associated industry of plastic production. So what's the way out? The business as usual is not the way out, nor are the current commitments, which are only 7% less, the way out. Nor are all the silver bullets that are being offered to us a way out. And we tested at least 3 of them. We tried to bring the concept of recycling all the way to its extremes, and we pushed it all the way towards its economic and feasibility limits, only to find out that the plastic that would leak into the ocean is increasing rather than decreasing. We worked on a reduce and substitute scenario and pushed it all the way towards the limits of consumer acceptability and financial affordability. And again, it would just about flatten the curve. We looked at a conventional linear collect and dispose scenario, and again, it would just about flatten the curve. Then we compounded these 3 scenarios. We created one that is both upstream and downstream, that tries to optimize across materials and geographies, and that seeks to optimize the impact, the ocean environmental impact over every dollar put into the system. And we called it the system change scenario. This scenario we like most. It actually could bring ocean pollution down by 82% until 2040. So let's look at this one more closely. And for that, let's take a perspective this time around, not from how much ocean plastic is leaking into the ocean on the y-axis, but let's look into the entire system, at the entire industry. So, and again, we are solving for the light red, which is ocean pollution. Ocean pollution, we are finding out, is in fact a derivative of mismanaged waste, open burning, terrestrial pollution, ocean pollution. And that, again, is a derivative of the total put on market volumes of plastic. They are here. And now we have tested very powerful mitigation levers that will help us to create wedges that bring us down to the right level of mismanaged waste, to the right level of ocean pollution. It started with reduce, which is a wedge that could offer up to 30% of the solution. Through eliminate, bananas don't have to be wrapped in plastic. Through reuse, such as the carry-along bottles that many of you will have in their bags right now, that they use for water instead of single use, or new delivery models, which are such as filling station and dispensers, which are a very promising wedge. Substitution, that's a wedge that offers up to 17% of the solution. Paper, coated paper, compostables. There's a lot of innovation and improvement of properties here, and many of them are, in fact, quite consistent and satisfactory with regard to their climate performance. And there is recycling, 20%. There's mechanical recycling in a closed loop where you actually take polymer to polymer products back into the same application. There's an open loop mechanical recycling, which takes it into typically a lower value application. And there's chemical recycling, a technology, pyrolysis, that we have known for quite a while, which, however, has been lingering at a very low quantity or capacity of 1 million tons, which would have to improve substantially in its both economic but also in its climate performance to play a major role. And then there is dispose wedge with 23%. This is a wedge we don't like a lot for environmental reasons, evidently, but also because particularly landfill and incineration are not returning any economic value back into the system. Now, this has created the wedges chart, probably the chart that, at least in my 25 years professional career, has absorbed most of our work. And there's a lot of sweat for many people that goes into this illustration. Let's quickly see what we have in front of us, how to interpret it. From a consumer point of view, the interpretation is a positive one. You will get what you need because consumers actually want the utility that is today delivered through single-use plastic, and they get it. They get it through ways that are dematerial, they get it through ways that are non-plastic, they get it through ways which are non-virgin. And so, in other words, their utility demand is being fulfilled. Let's take the perspective of industry. And again, it's not such a bad story because here are some very powerful growth wedges, such as reduce and substitute and recycle, in which industry can actually create a value add and thrive. The one wedge that is stagnating is the virgin to dispose one, which is a stagnating wedge, other than capital markets might currently imply. And then there's the virgin to mismanage, which is a shrinking wedge, which is what we actually had been wanting to see. Now, you will ask us, how can you be so sure about the size and the shape of those wedges? We passed those solutions through 5 tests. And the first one is an affordability test. And here's a cost curve, which shows us what is the net cost or the net benefit below the zero line that actually comes with a solution. And it shows that reduce can be an economically very powerful and beneficial lever, followed by recycling, which can be both in the money and out of the money, by dispose, which essentially is a cost item, a net cost item in perpetuity. And then there's the substitute wedge, which is more expensive, but it's still affordable. The rule that we applied is a product must not be more than 1% more expensive than in the old solution in the global south, and it must not be more than 5% more expensive in the global north. That's not the only test. We also had a performance test. Would that this alternative solution be as good as the single-use plastic has been in the past? Is the technology available in a technology readiness level 4+? A convenience test. Do we see somewhere in the market a proof that consumers actually accept it? And a feasibility test. Do we really think realistically that it's possible to ramp up a process industry at the speed as we need it? And so we took those tests and we subjected more of all the 15 most important plastic applications to it. And we tested more than 150 technological solutions that sit in those wedges as we went through those applications. Now, you might say our solution is very ambitious, or it's completely under ambitious. It's under ambitious because still there are 5 million tons of leakage left behind. You could say it's very ambitious if you look to what the system change scenario really does. It is about reducing the business as usual plastic production by 1/3. It's about substituting 1/6. It's about taking the amount of products that are designed for recycling from something like 21 to 54%. It's about installing a 90% collection rate in the middle and low income countries. That means that 4 billion people have to be brought until 2040 into collection, 500,000 people a day. This is really tall order. It's about creating or growing the mechanical recycling sector almost 3x. It's by creating almost a new sector around chemical recycling, which helps to replenish polymers in the system by 13 million tons. And at the same time, it's about building new landfills, something that, of course, no one would fancy. It's about reducing and actually decommissioning today's practice of waste exports. And it's about creating solutions for 2 million tons of microplastic that reach the ocean today, something that we talk a lot about in the report, less in this presentation today. Now, but there's still 10% of mismanaged waste and 5 million tons of ocean leakage left behind. The only way to stop that is to move towards a concerted, funded agenda of innovation around topics like monomaterials that allow us to move away from composites and laminates. It's about packaging-free alternatives. It's about bio-benign materials that actually do biodegrade within nature under very broad conditions. It's about distributed collection systems, very often linked to a better use of data. And it's about modern, advanced sorting and recycling technology. What does it cost? We built the systems model, which has been driving all our calculations and modeling attempts. It allows us to talk about company level cash costs, so that of every single actor within this chart, about system level cash costs, and about planetary costs that also look at the loss of natural capital. We looked at system level costs. And what we are seeing is that this is an attractive proposition. For governments, for example, it's cheaper to run the systems scenario than the business as usual, or let alone a more linear scenario. But even for private industry, this is a cheaper way. It's a $1.3 trillion cheaper way of providing the services that you want to provide through single-use plastic. Again, this makes you more competitive in the eyes of your customers. For the environment, it's a 25% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And it could, in fact, be a job engine of dignified work, about at least 1 million additional jobs within the new plastic circular economy. And of course, it would reduce ocean leakage by 82%. That's not a surprise, because that's what we have been solving for. So where to start? First of all, we have to start very soon. If we wait another 5 years, 80 million additional tons will leak into the ocean. That's 50% more than we have today. And secondly, we have to start where it matters most. And this is a question of going after those materials that are least recyclable, least prone to collection and recycling, multi-layers, multi-materials, but also flexible monomaterials. They constitute 80% of the problem. And at the same time, geographically, we have to help those countries most that are lower middle income countries, where about almost 90% of the leakage occurs. Now, what's the price? Why should we do this? This is a tall order, collective challenge. Why should we go for it? So for that, let me quickly summarize. The business as usual is gruesome. The current commitments are insufficient. There's no silver bullet. There's, however, a technological solution that actually could take us out of that. There is a need for a massive funded innovation agenda. There are massive business risks to the established place and huge opportunities to the new place. There is a priority that we have to set to geographies over others, and the time to act is now. The price, if we were doing that, is a world in which the consumer is actually better off because they get what they want at better economics. It's a world where governments would have to pay less. It's a world where business actually thrives within those growth wedges, where we have less CO2 emission, where we can actually have a model of prosperity decoupled from plastic use. And it's a world where many people will find employment and social opportunity within this new plastic economy. That, in fact, is an important one, particularly at a moment where the world is trying to recover from a corona crisis and we have to create income for people. Now, that leads me to another reason why the plastic waste crisis actually draws my interest. We are back in Muncha. We, in the STOP program, tried to clean up just one stretch of the beach, 100 meters. It took us a while. Once that had been completed, the children of the village of Muncha were flocking to the beach to find there was sand under the plastic. And they found this is a place to play, and it's a place to be a child. And it struck me, if it's plastic that is taking their fisheries, and if it's plastic that is taking their tourism appeal, it is also that is taking their dignity. And if all those reasons that we talked about up to here are not good enough, this should be a reason to act. Winnie, back to you.
Thank you, Martin, for that very detailed and thought-provoking presentation of our work. So first, I'd like to remind our participants that you can enter your questions by writing them in the chat box at the side of your screens. You can also tweet your questions to us using the hashtag #BreakingThePlasticWave. So second, I also want to thank Martin for sharing that very touching story at the end about the children in Muncha. It really helps remind us why we need to solve this problem. So my first reaction to your presentation and our work is that our analysis, our findings actually give us hope. Many of the solutions are already at hand. If we choose to, we can actually do great things together globally as a society. We would be able to solve the plastic pollution problem in one generation. And we are at a crossroads. The question is, what choice do we make? The report, which contains many more details than Martin can share in his presentation, can show us the how in achieving the impact possible in the system change scenario. It breaks down the plastic system by plastic categories, by geographic characteristics, by different parts of the plastic system, and also includes microplastics that enter the environment. The data and analysis allow us to dig deep into the system and consider different real-world pathways to curb plastic pollution. I want to highlight just two of the key geographic findings. The first is the role of the informal sector in the middle and low-income countries, like some of the countries in Asia. This informal sector is currently responsible for collecting about 60% of the plastic that is being recycled globally today. As we move forward, it'll be important to ensure fair payment, safe working conditions, and secure livelihoods for both formal and informal waste collectors. The second is the growing contribution of microplastics to ocean plastic pollution. The biggest source of microplastic we found will be from tire dust. The amount and the proportion of microplastics in terms of overall plastic pollution, especially in high-income countries, will need to be addressed. I also want to highlight the sobering fact that we do need to start acting now. Because if we do not, a delay of just 5 years in our action could mean 80 million metric tons more plastic in the ocean by the year 2040. There are some places now in the world, as some of you have experienced, where we could literally be swimming through plastic waste. We have the opportunity to stop this from happening everywhere in the ocean. And I'll admit, the road ahead will be challenging, but there is a path forward. It is one where all stakeholders work together. Governments, with businesses, with innovators, with civil society. There's a role for everyone. And by working together and starting now, we can be on the path to near zero plastic going into the ocean. So now we will go into the Q&A portion of the webinar. We would love to hear from you. So please enter your questions again in the chat box at the side of your screens. And you can also tweet it to us with the hashtag Breaking the Plastic Wave. So we have some questions already. And the first one will be going to Martin. So Martin, what is the role of Asia in building a new plastic system?
Asia is central, Winnie, and that's why this webinar is so important, and that's why we are happy to have attracted your interest. Asia is the continent where the plastic waste wave is actually breaking. But at the same time, it's also where many of the solutions are currently being under development. Let me talk about Indonesia, for example, because that's where at least my personal involvement has been deepest. Indonesia is a unique country through its size, through the number of islands, through the uniqueness of its ocean landscapes and its wonderful nature. At the same time, it's also a country that suffers particularly from ocean pollution. So currently there's about 5 million tons that go mismanaged. It is going to be to increase to something like 6 in 2025, and then it's bound to double. At the same time, it's also a country where we start seeing a lot of political leadership in order to fend it off. And there's no other country that has actually taken such a strong stance on an agenda to reduce plastic waste into the ocean by 70% in 2025. There has been an initiative, the National Partnership for Action on Plastic, which is probably unique around the world in the way how government and industry and civil society actors have partnered up and tried to build an agenda and a roadmap of how to get out of plastic pollution. And they did exactly what we have done here on a global level and just presented to our audience. They have created a wedge diagram and a strategy for Indonesia, which explains where could things be headed if we don't act, and what could be done until 2025 and until 2040 to come back with a very concise and a very well-defined agenda about reduction and substitution, around to redesign of plastics, about particularly a very ambitious program of doubling collection from something like 39% to 80% by 2025. Also about a significant program to double recycling capacity and to build a higher quality, more controlled waste disposal facilities. So a very well-defined program of action with a very real and sort of inescapable deadline that government set to itself by 2025. It also showed that if we want to fend the challenge of plastic waste in Asia, we have to accept that this requires both run rate costs and investments. In Indonesia, it's probably a 5 billion investment that is required, and annual expenditures of about 1 billion. So we can't talk about the plastic problem without having an answer of how to fund that system that's currently underfunded or not funded at all.
Thanks, Martin. That's really important to hear about what the role of government can do. And it's really great to see Indonesia's leadership on this. So how about businesses? What is the role for Asian businesses? And there's also another part about policy makers, which I'll tackle. But first to you, what can businesses do, particularly the ones in Asia?
Look, in a way, every company needs to draw a wedges chart for itself. And I think when it comes to the plastic crisis, the industry is fully alerted to it. So I think we move beyond the state where industry needs to be educated around it. Here's an industry out of a few that really got it, that they are exposed to a risk that they can't walk away from. It's even a bit tougher than in climate change, because this time round it's about a selected number of companies, and it's much easier to trace them because we talk about branded waste. And that's why we see a lot of the actors actually taking this very, very serious, but at the same time discovering that some of those activities they can't do alone. They need to run through their entire portfolio, particularly of single-use packaging material, to see which part of that do we really need for our customers. Is there a reduction opportunity? Wedge number one. They have to run through which part of that could potentially be substituted in a way that is acceptable to consumers and acceptable to climate change, which we shouldn't forget. So we need to be very rigorous in the way we look at substitutes, but there are viable substitutes out there. And then they have to look into opportunities to bring recycled content back into their products. You would wish that there is a competition in the future where companies compete about the highest recycled content in their products, where a world where they and consumers would actually recognize that this is something that adds to a premium brand, and that you would wish that there are systems and policies in place which in fact make it favorable for companies to have very high recycled content. At the same time, companies, when they do that, will also find out that they are caught in a system. They can't do it alone. Sort of building a recycling and collection system is nothing that you can do as one company. And here they have to move into systems such as EPR systems or joint systems that actually start to fund the recovery and revalorization of this material. This is a huge new play to industry because so far we came out of a world and out of a culture where we could consider these end of pipe questions to be taken care of. If the numbers are right that you and I presented today, Winnie, then I think industry will have to accept that it's not good enough to wait for someone to pick it up. Industry also needs to take action and start help to build and fund those systems. And one way to make those systems more funded, sort of more economic and economically feasible, is to enter materials into the system that actually are easily recyclable, so that they are paying part of the system and part of the collection itself.
Great. Yeah, actually, that leads really well into the policy side of answering this question. And that connects really well with extended producer responsibility, whereby governments put in place the policies for it to set up the incentives and the enabling environment for businesses to do just that, to take the materials back into the system. But I also want to highlight that from our work, that reduction is one of the most important things that governments can actually play a role in, putting in place policies that can manage and limit the production of plastic products that they put into the system. As you showed, Martin, we have to reduce about 30% of the plastic out of the system. So, and governments can really put in place policies for that. The second piece, particularly also in Asian countries, what we cannot reduce, substitute, or recycle away must be properly managed. And collection in many of a lot of Asian countries will need to be ramped up. So governments have a role to really play in that, to ensure that these types of services are provided to people so that the waste that are generated can be properly managed. So I think really what we're saying is that there's really a role for all stakeholders. Governments must do what they are best at, and to set the level playing field, set the policies, and businesses will need to play a role in what they invest, what they put on the market, and And together, we have a chance of solving this problem. So there are other questions that have come in, and really thank you, audience, for sharing your questions. The next one is about pollution on land. What Martin and our Breaking the Plastic Wave report showed was what's happening in the ocean, but actually in our accompanying science paper that both Martin and I mentioned earlier, we also put some estimates for terrestrial plastic pollution. And what we found is that actually on land, the numbers are higher. You know, in for the aquatic environments, oceans, rivers, we're getting in 2016 11 million metric tons of plastic going into the ocean. On land, it's 18 million metric tons going into terrestrial environments. And then in 2040, if we don't do anything, the amount of plastic going into the ocean is estimated at 29 million metric tons per year. But for land, that number is 52 million metric tons per year. So really, the plastic pollution problem is unmanageable on land or in the sea in 2040 if we don't change our ways. So with that, I am going to turn to Martin for our next question from Jess Reyes. She asked if we could kindly expound as to how collection rates can be increased. Martin.
Thanks a lot, Jess. Probably amongst all the things, all the titanic efforts that we have ahead of us, building a global collection system, as your question implies, is the toughest one. So just those numbers. Until 2040, we need to bring more than 4 billion into collection systems. And again, that's 500,000 people a day over the next 20 years, every day from Monday to Sunday and over again. The way in which we do that can't be the same way in which we've done it today. Today, we do it by leaving the formal collection to the municipalities, and they recover a bit of that through fees and through taxes. And on the other hand, we have the informal sector, which is a sector that is along all dimensions undignified and has to be taken into a sector with working conditions that are acceptable. And the way to do that, the first way to do that is, in fact, the best way to fund the collection system is only to enter products into use which have enough value to be collected and to be recycled. So that's the single biggest economic intervention that we have to make, and that takes us all the way upstream. And we need to start getting serious in the way we are changing our products. The global commitment launched by the New Plastic Economy is a very important step where hundreds of companies actually committed only to bring products onto the market by 2025 which are recyclable. That's a huge step, but it's not enough. More companies have to do that. We need to get even more rigorous by defining which are the products that are allowed to enter the system versus not. So then the next thing that we have to do is we have to make sure that we are finding better ways to fund formal collection, and we have to massively expand it. Governments will have to find ways to fund this in ways that are more dependable than they are today. And then we also will have to find new ways in which we can actually progress and mature and dignify the informal sector, first of all, by adding demand into the system. Secondly, by ensuring that we have a full line of custody and accountability through new technologies. There are wonderful examples in India, in Haiti, and elsewhere where we can demonstrate that what it actually takes to build those systems. The most important thing that probably will happen, and all the progressive and enlightened industry actors are fully aware of that there will be industry co-funding in the form of EPR systems or equivalent systems that ensure that companies start to pay, companies and consumers, of course, will start to pay for the externality of single-use plastic. Without that addition into the system, we are short of two things. A, we are short of additional funding, which we dearly need. The Indonesian numbers have been showing that, 5 billion, 1 billion. And secondly, we are short of a steering mechanism that actually forces us to move to a next generation of more recyclable, more collectible products.
Great, thanks, Martin. Well, this next question from Chika Aoki, it's a really good one, and the question is, what do we think about the feasibility of the vision that we presented? What measures are most significant in each of high, middle, and low-income countries to achieve the vision? And do we plan to estimate how much the cost of inaction will be? I'm going to tackle the first two. I will leave the last one about cost of inaction to you, Martin. So, Chika, you really highlighted an important aspect of this work about the feasibility. And it was actually one of the really key parts of the work, whereby the system change scenario, we actually called the rates that we modeled about how much we can implement, how much we could scale up. We called it the maximum foreseeable assessment of maximum foreseeable rates. And these are rates that are based on historical examples of other technologies that have been scaled up very quickly, based on our expert panels knowledge about the state of these different technologies and these different sectors and where they could go in the next 20 years. We deliberately wanted to push the boundaries, but also making sure that it is actually realistic. Because if we don't model things that are realistic, we will actually not be able to truly understand the potential impact. And that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to see what we could actually do with the different solutions that are in existence today and how far they could actually take us in terms of reducing plastic pollution. So the rates are things that we have seen before. They are rates that our experts believe are doable, but you're absolutely right. They are challenging. They will take a lot of effort from all stakeholders. It will take a lot of investment, as Martin said, but they are things that we can do, and they are also things that can give us a lot of co-benefits. And I'll turn to Martin to answer that. In terms of the differences that different countries can focus on, in our report, we highlight the different priorities for different income levels. So I recommend that you look at that, because there are very specific priorities we detailed. And so I will turn over to Martin to focus on the inaction piece and the co-benefits piece, because I think that's actually really important. Martin.
Yeah, Winnie, but allow me to add one thought to what you've said, to amend it. I know exactly that out there, half of the listeners now will be sitting there and said, how crazy is this study and being under ambitious? And the other half will be sitting there and say, how crazy is it and being over ambitious? What we try to do is, and that's why we try to also to publish it through science, was to offer a scientific methodology rather than a moral judgment on what is the right way forward. We try to offer a methodology that allows us to compare different methods and to say what would have to be done to achieve what. So because we need it, and more important than the paper is this methodology, because that's what the community needs to work with now and for very fierce debates. So this is a tool, it's not a paper. All we are saying here is that sort of if you set a certain number of rules, and we called it those 5 tests, then here's what you get. it could be that sort of we should be much more ambitious. It could be that it's already crazy to say what we have said, just sort of to call it back into everyone's memory. Essentially, we have said, if we want to get to near zero leakage in 2040, we will have to freeze the production volumes on the level of 2020. That's a radical statement to make. But at the same time, it's a radical statement to make that by 2040, we are still not done with ocean leakage. So in a way, our analysis showed what kind of precarious situation we already got ourselves into. And that takes me then to your third question. What's the price of inaction? There are a number of ways to put numbers around it. You can talk about 40 billion of externalities that we have in the ocean. You can talk about costs and a risk that's running towards particularly the brand industry, which is larger than the profit pool, which in fact puts your very business model at risk. But in the way, you could also say, don't believe in any of those numbers. The costs of not solving this are just infinite, because there is a trend line that tells us that the productivity of the ocean system is going to suffer substantially out of the plastic scenarios that we set up for 2040. It's a world that we can't go to. It's unthinkable, and we haven't even talked about the human risks. So both from an ecological perspective, but from a health perspective, but also from an industry exposure and an industry risk, this is a territory that we can't even think to walk into, whatever the numbers show us.
Thank you, Martin. And that leads actually really well to our next question and last question from Navin Narayan. I'm really sorry if I mispronounced your name, from India. So plastic is now becoming an issue in many developing countries, including India. It has many impacts, including social impacts. How can these also be addressed? And this is a really important question, because we don't want to solve the plastic pollution problem by creating many, many other problems. And we, in fact, looked at various other socioeconomic factors in analyzing our various solutions. We looked at the impact on greenhouse gas emissions. We looked at the impact on jobs. We looked at the costs to governments. And what we found is that with the system change scenario, we are actually better across all three of these indicators. With the system change scenario, we'll have about 25% less greenhouse gas emissions than in the business as usual scenario. We'll have create almost 1 million more jobs globally in the system change scenario. And in terms of cost to governments globally, from the waste management perspective, this could save governments $70 billion from waste management system investments. So from that perspective, we believe that the system change scenario is good for the environment from the plastic perspective, from the greenhouse gas perspective, but also good for people from the health perspective, less pollution, less open burning of the waste, less plastic pollution in the environment, and better jobs. So we believe that these pathway we proposed and the solutions we outlined could actually have a lot of the social impacts that governments are looking for. And actually, there is one last question. It's actually a really good one, and hopefully, Martin, if you could maybe answer in a couple of minutes as we're running up on time. This one is from Ted Santos. How can we raise participation from plastic producer companies?
Well, first of all, I think we have to consider that this is not an end of the world scenario for the plastic industry. You could in fact frame it as quite an interesting one. sort of because the plastic industry in the long run, of course, has a couple of challenges to address anyway. There's a question where we get our feedstock from. There is a question of how do we differentiate ourselves from our competitors? How can we actually build, have value add? All of that actually could be positively answered by the vision of a recycling economy, a recycling industry. So there is a place for the plastic producing industry actually to be as a provider of plastic utility. So and as a manager of a circular plastic system, there's a lot to be done. There's a lot of value add. There's also a lot of shareholder value sitting in such a concept. It's tough for those that are, of course, virtually integrated into oil and gas, and I think that's no secret that we can't hide, even not in the report, that there is less space for virgin material in the long run, if not just if we believe in climate change, but also if we believe in healthy oceans. But building this this economy is in fact an interesting one. So if you are just about plastic producing, there can be a positive answer if you actually look at yourself as a circular player. If you are just about providing material packaging, then there's even a bigger answer, because then you add the whole wedge of substitutes, which is an interesting potential growth market. And if you are in the market that is even broader, in the market of providing packaging utility, then there's even a bigger market, because what we call reduce doesn't mean that there's nothing happening. Perhaps with the exception of eliminate, which is the smaller part of reduce, these new delivery models, they are a sector, they are an industry, they are an employment opportunity, they're a shareholder value opportunity for those who run it. So I think the business of delivering circular plastic or material circular packaging solutions or packaging utility, they are all growth markets that you want to be in. That's a story that you want to be telling your shareholders.
Great, thank you so much, Martin. And I think the hour has gone really fast, much faster than we knew. And so I will be closing this webinar. Thank you very much to all of you for participating. Based on the questions, based on the research we've done, it's really clear that there's a lot of deep thinking going on and many efforts underway. And what I want to underscore is that to solve this pollution problem, we need all stakeholders to be engaged. And we'll need the international institutions, governments, businesses, and civil society to participate, and more importantly, to lead in these solutions. And the story that Martin shared about the children in Muncar in Indonesia really shows us what is at stake. Solving this problem is vital for our children's present and future, and for all of our future. So I hope you'll take the key takeaway from today's webinar is that plastic pollution is an urgent problem, and we all need to work together to put in place the ambitious actions to stop this pollution problem now. On behalf of the Pew Charitable Trusts and SYSTEMIQ and our thought partners, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the University of Oxford, the University of Leeds, and Common Seas, I want to thank all of you again for tuning in today and for engaging with your stimulating questions. This webinar has been recorded, as has been the previous one. Please share the link with your colleagues, and please visit our website at the bottom of your screen for a copy of the report and for more information. And we all look forward to engaging with as many of you as possible in the future as we work together to stop the plastic pollution problem. Thank you again, and have a great rest of your day.